Today, I would like to welcome the management of Zubair Engineering Company, our academic advisors, and the viewers to this presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to present the consultancy findings and give recommendations to Zubair Engineering Company based on its requirements for coal sourcing for a power project in India. The aim of the consultancy project is to provide the company with detailed analysis of coal supply chain from origin to destination port, including the sourcing countries, international sea freight options, and recommended ports for unloading of coal. The structure of this presentation is as such. We will talk about the main findings, the industry structure analysis, logistics assessment, coal trading methods and price analysis, and then we will talk about conclusion and recommendations.
Main findings. The main question we are trying to answer by this project is, what is the most suitable supply chain model for the company to import coal to the port of entry in India? Broadly, this question is answered in three smaller parts. First, what is the most suitable sourcing alternative? Indonesia. But it is extremely risky to rely on only one supplier, and therefore Zubair Engineering Company should source its coal from at least two countries. In an initial stage, it is recommended to source from economic mix of coal from Indonesia and South Africa or Australia as contingency market. Given the risk of reduction of coal exports from Indonesia, the share of Indonesia could be gradually replaced with South African or Australian suppliers and develop other markets in the long term. Second, what is the most suitable unloading alternative? Indonesia and South Africa or Australia are selected as sourcing countries. Pradeep Port is the most suitable alternative for ZEC to unload the coal imported from these countries, and therefore the ideal location for plant could be in Orissa region. Third, what is the most suitable shipping alternative? In the case of Indonesia, total 71 of Panamax size of vessels are needed to deliver 5 million tons of coal to India. Now, Andres is going to present the main findings from the industry structure analysis, where the group understood the main industry dynamics.
Okay, thank you, Adil. So first of all, to make the industry structural analysis, we start by trying to understand the main trends and dynamics, especially in coal consumption. So here at the right part of the graph of the slide, you can see basically the world coal consumption and basically how is that concentration in the different markets. We can identify that China, USA, and India comprise most of the total coal consumption around the world. But it's also important to understand the main trends in terms of coal growth consumption. So here at the left part of the graph, you can see the growth in the different markets. So we identify that India and China have had the biggest growth rates over the last 5 years, with 8% to India and 10% to China. And if we make a group of the rest of the countries, we can see that there was a decrease of 1% in total coal consumption over the same 5 years. So this is really important because basically what happened in China and India will drive all the changes in the world trade coal. So now moving to coal production, we wanted to understand what were the main surpluses and deficits around the world. So here at the left part of the screen, you can identify the main surplus countries. So here you see, for example, Australia, Indonesia, Russia, Colombia, and South Africa, which are in the same way, they are the main exporters of coal around the world. So if we move to the right part of the graph, you can see that markets as Japan, China, South Korea, Taiwan, and India, they are the biggest deficit countries in terms of coal production. So in the same way, they are the biggest importers and therefore it's really important. It's also important to see here in this part of the graph that most of the deficit in terms of coal production around the world is concentrated in the Asia Pacific area. So that's really important to understand, because basically in the world coal market, it's generating two markets basically. One is the Pacific market, and the second one is the Atlantic market. Pacific market, it's basically all the nations that are in Asia, and Atlantic market, it's basically the demand that comes from the Americas and mainly Europe. So here you can find, for example, how it's really interesting, because you can see at the left part how Australia and Indonesia, who are in blue, are the main suppliers of all these surplus countries, or all these deficitarian countries in terms of coal production, like Japan, China, South Korea, and India. So that is really important to take in mind as well. So another, nevertheless, that we have identified here, this data is based on the current production rates. It's also important to understand what's the scenario that is going to happen in the next few years. And that's it, that is not here, but we found that something really interesting, and is that the company has to start looking for new markets. What we did was basically an analysis of where the big coal producers around the world are going to invest, and where are they focusing their investment. And we found that Mozambique, for example, is a really interesting market, and apparently is going to become one of the biggest coal producers in the world. So, for example, companies as Vale from Brazil, they made huge investments in Mozambique, and they are planning to start producing on the month of July of 2011. Also, Tata has investment, and like those two, there are many examples. Now, if we move to try to understand what are the main trade patterns in India, main trade patterns, we can identify that India is basically sourcing all or most of its coal from Indonesia and South Africa. 57% of the total coal that is being imported by India comes from Indonesia, and 37% of the total coal imports also come from South Africa. So here at the left part of the graph, we can see how this growth is been performing over the last 10 years. In blue, you can see Indonesia. It is possible to observe how this growth, how the Indian market has absorbed all that boost in exports of the Indonesian coal, that they are being the behavior of the coal exports from Indonesia. And also it's important to see how you can see the growth in imports from South Africa. This is basically explained because South Africa now it's changing its patterns of exports, and now it's trying to move all the exports that they were directing to European markets, to the Pacific market, to the Atlantic market, sorry. They are trying to direct all those exports to the Pacific market, especially to India, because India has lower requirements in terms of coal quality and coal calorific value, and therefore they also pay well, and they have a good demand for their kind of coal. So now, if we move to slide number 6, we can see this is basically an analysis of cost distribution in the supply chain. Most of the coal traded around the world, especially in the spot markets, is based on FOB, or free on board prices. Now, if we analyze the free on board prices, here we see that from that total FOB price, 40% comes from the mining cost itself, and the rest, 60%, is because of the local transportation cost and also the loading of the shipments. So basically, this is really important to understand, because it gave us an insight of the need for efficient logistics systems and especially in infrastructure investment. So the image is even bigger if we include into that analysis the freight cost. So from the total price at destination port, 12% of that total cost comes from the freight cost. Only seeing the freight cost, if we analyze the concentration over the total cost, is not that big. So this proportion gives some insights also about if the companies found opportunities on the free on board prices on the spot markets, they could actually take advantage of those opportunities and go to those markets because the logistic or the freight cost is not that big in terms of the total cost. And also this cost is calculated according to the Indonesian coal indexes. That is basically the cheapest in the market, and therefore if you do this calculation based on the Australian or the more expensive coals, this percentage actually decrease. So now, as we see the importance of logistics and having good infrastructure to the development of coal trade, we can see that the economies of scale is one of the main drivers in the price or the cost of the coal, the total cost of the coal. So that's how also most of the coal is concentrated, or most of the coal exports is concentrated only the 5 biggest coal exporters. There are BHP Billiton, Anglo American, Adaro, Rio Tinto, and Xstrata, that show concentration, for example, in South Africa of 86%. It's concentrated on those producers. So that is really interesting to have in mind. And it's also show the behavior of the companies, because here you can see, for example, joint ventures between big companies to develop infrastructure projects in different markets to reduce the cost of delivering the coal. Okay, and now here we can see we made an analysis and a comparison of the different coal prices indexes from different destinations. So here, basically the main message is that the lowest graph that you see at the bottom, it's from the coal that is sourced from Indonesia. Why? Because it's the only coal, or one of the only coal indexes that has a lower calorific value and therefore has a lower price. So apart from that, most of the coal price indexes have a similar behavior, and many times they cross to each other. So at some point, for example, coal from South Africa could be cheaper to Australia, but this trend can change over the time. So thank you very much.
Now that we found the most important markets around the world, it is necessary to understand the implications of exporting from these countries, and in terms of suitability of destination ports and shipping alternatives. I will leave it to Gyujin to explain this in more detail.